trying to start the broadcast, but it's not starting. It says press *1 to start the broadcast for all attendees, and I keep doing that, but it's not working. Oh, come on. I don't think it's started yet. Why isn't it working? Click to start screen sharing. That's what I'm doing. Why is this not working? Okay, there we go. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. This is Terry Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, and I want to welcome you to the webinar this afternoon on effective education strategies for proper recycling. We're excited to have so many great participants and presenters to join us today. This is a joint webinar that is sponsored by the Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC, and the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, or NMOA, and we will have participants from both organizations involved in the webinar. The origin of the idea for this webinar was a series of webinars we've been holding over the last 4 or 5 months that focus on ways of advancing proper recycling in the face of all of the upheaval in the recycling markets and the impacts of the China National Sword restrictions. There's more and more concern about how to improve residential participation in recycling programs in terms of ensuring that they recycle what they're supposed to be recycling and that they minimize contamination of the recycled streams. So today we're focusing on the importance of public education related to this, and we really have a great panel of presenters who are going to share their perspectives and experiences with us. Before I get into the presentations, I just want to urge all of you to use the chat feature box at the bottom of your screen or the question feature box to pose questions or comments as the presentations proceed. We will be monitoring, I will be monitoring those fields. Everybody should have a little control panel on one side or the other of your screen, and you can use the chat or the question feature. We will hold questions till the end because we have so many participants in this webinar this afternoon. We will be moderating the questions and hopefully get to as many questions as we possibly can that participants have in that at the end of the webinar. So our first presenters hail from a company called C&C. We have Cindy Jolicoeur. She is the General Manager of C&C East in Boston. Her background encompasses nearly 30 years of marketing, advertising, and communications on behalf of some of America's leading brands. But one assignment that she undertook with the US EPA's Energy Star program marked a turning point from her focus on, quote, selling stuff to, quote, doing good. So over the last 20 years, she has focused on strategic communications campaigns for clients supporting the public good. A true omni-channel marketer, Cindy enjoys diving deep into client challenges and devising new ways to connect the dots between people and ideas to drive behavior change. From initiatives to media partnerships, she is an expert at leveraging every touch point to engage brands with people and inspire action. Passionate about cause marketing and community service, Cindy can often be found running campaigns to help support the schools, library, and the arts in her small town. She is also, in case you're interested, an avid baker, and her Jala cakes are the centerpiece of many celebrations. She's going to be joined by Anna Demers, who is an account supervisor in the C&C Seattle office, so both sides of the country are covered in this one. As a 9-year C&C veteran and a self-proclaimed people person, Anna loves talking to people and telling stories. From financial literacy to girl empowerment to recycling, the approach is the same. Talk to people, listen to their story, and find the gems that make them stand out. At CNC, Anna oversees the tactics and campaign details in order to develop and implement behavior change campaigns for social good issues. She stands out from the crowd and others, and thinks so too. She was named the 2012 Outstanding Young Professional by the Puget Sound chapter of the Public Relations Society of America. Before the next two presenters, I'll introduce them, but I'm going to give it over to Anna and Cindy, and they're going to take it away. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Terry. So this is Anna talking. I'm going to kind of get us kicked off here. So as Terry mentioned, everyone is dealing with the current situation with China sword, and we know that on the consumer side, simply put, recycling right can be pretty confusing. As recycling programs have transitioned to single stream processes and items like plastic bags, bulky items, liquids, and food are all ending up in our recycling facilities across the country. We know that consumers are having a difficult time with this, and we know that old habits stick. And so as we are experiencing these high contamination rates, we know that municipalities are trying to find alternative international markets that further the process for materials, especially domestically, and look for alternatives and solutions. So today we are going to, Cindy's going to kind of kick things off with some data that we have, and then because we are on the marketing side of things, we will explore how we have simplified not only behaviors but messages in order to get the right material in the right bin. So with that, I will kick it over to Cindy to talk about our data.
Thanks, Anna. So anytime we need to plan a public outreach campaign, it's really important to take a look at what people's current perceptions and knowledge base are, and from that informed perspective, figure out the messages and the tactics that are important for our plan to be effective in reaching audiences. And clearly, contamination is such a huge issue. Helping people understand how to recycle properly continues to be a challenge for us. And I think you're running screen for me, right?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. So we ran a survey, an online survey. This is a national panel, and found, of course, that to 2/3 of Americans, just about, recycling is considered very important, and then to another 30% considered somewhat important. So people do care about recycling. I think we all recognize that to be a given. But what's interesting is that within this group, audiences with higher income, higher education, and also those with kids at home consider recycling even more important than the rest of the audience as a whole. And that's about 70%, just considering it very important. So that information is useful in helping to target who the influencers may be, who your richest target audience is, and then targeting them with media and other communication vehicles, and find ways to help them become influencers in their community. Also, when we surveyed, we took a little bit of a skew at different parts of the country to understand which parts of the country recycling was most important to. And thanks to the work of people on this phone, the Northeast comes out far ahead with about 92% considering recycling somewhat or very important, followed only by the West, of course, where my colleague Anna is sitting, helping to educate populations, and that is coming in at about 91%. So what's interesting also about this recycling data is that it showed us that most people think they know what they're doing. They don't even think they need any help. Most people feel that they are good recyclers. They've got it, almost half say they're great. Another 45% say, yeah, I'm okay. And only 7% think that they're not good at recycling. And of those who think that recycling is important, that whole amount feeling that they are really good at it in the Northeast is 92%. So that says to us we have a big education job to do to help people understand what they really need to do to recycle effectively. Because we know 92% of the market is not doing the job right. Next slide, please. Thanks. Clearly, there's a lot of room for improvement. We threw some questions out there just to get a sense of what people understood about what was recyclable and what was not. Among the people who told us that they recycle often, 52% said they always recycle their plastic bags, and how they do it is throw it in the bin. So more than half of people are unaware that throwing those bags in the bin is not the way to get the job done. 35% say they always recycle greasy pizza boxes. 28% take out containers with food, fill in them, and 59% always recycle shredded paper. So I think it's really telling for us to understand that even though our audiences think they know what they're doing with recycling, there's still a great deal of improvement that we can achieve by helping to reverse the mistaken perceptions. And even the very best recyclers need help. So this is a chart where we only looked at people who said that recycling is very important to them and people who said that recycling is somewhat important to them. And even to these audiences whom this is a really important issue, they still don't know the proper way to get the job done. So where are they going for help? That's on the next slide. When in doubt, we ask them, if you don't know what to do with an item that's in your hand, what do you do with it? Do you throw it in the trash, or do you throw it in the recycle bin and let somebody else figure it out? Or do you look up what to do with it, or ask someone else? It was very interesting to us that nearly a third of people will look up what to do with their recycling. And this is a great piece of learning, because by looking for information on how to recycle, that tells us that we can target people online to help them understand where to go, what to do, and offer them resources to learn how to recycle things properly. So how do we go about getting the message out there? We looked at where people are looking to learn about where to recycle, and there was a recent survey from the food service packaging industry and another Harris poll that told us a little bit of data. So increasingly, people are looking to websites to find their information. More than half rely on their city, their county, or the recycling company's information. More than half rely on internet searches, just a Google search. And over a third say that they either seek out or they're provided with information from their local government. And yet, the Recycling Partnership published a study earlier this year that found that less than half of communities actually had recycling information on their city websites. So as a learning, understanding that that's where customers are going to go first, we need to make that information easy for them to access. So some communication opportunities for programs to consider are providing clear and simple instruction, certainly at the cart, certainly at the trash bin, certainly at the recycling bin, but also think about meeting your consumers where they are and where they're looking for information. Online, on your program pages, or on your town website, using search engine marketing and search engine optimization so that if a consumer in your service territory types in, can I recycle a pizza box, they get sent to your website to learn the proper ways to recycle. And of course, other outreach opportunities like community events and educating families with children by providing content to your schools or education events are very important tactics that can leverage the learning that people with kids tend to do more recycling and reach those audiences through their children. Also, social content and social advertising is an excellent way to very cost-effectively serve up messages about proper recycling in your communities. You can target by communities, you can use your town's social media pages, or create your own. But I think that this important learning here is that people think recycling is important, they want to do the right thing, they already think they're doing the right thing, and they don't even know how ill-informed they are. And those that are looking for information are going online to do it. So let's take those insights and use them to help reach and educate more people about proper recycling to avoid contamination. Anna, I'll kick it right back to you.
Yeah, so as Cindy was saying, we have people hearing thousands and thousands of messages per day, and we only know that they only have a few seconds to catch their attention. So the next couple case studies that we'd like to share with you really emphasize keeping it simple and focusing on what matters. Getting the right material in the right bin is going to make a difference for recycling programs. So we'll jump into a couple case studies here. So our first case study is Recycle Often, Recycle Right. And so C+C worked with Waste Management in order to create Recycle Often, Recycle Right, and really emphasize education and use that as a base for behavior change in order to set groundwork that everyone was working from the same page. And really focus on those accepted items that are almost nationally universal. So if you look to the right here, we have our first rule is recycle all empty bottles, cans, and paper. The second rule was to keep food and liquids out of the recycling. And then third was to keep those loose plastic bags out of the recycling. So we're really increasing the basic materials with value in markets, and those second and third steps are really addressing those contamination issues. So in community-based social marketing, we like to focus on these three audiences that we have here, and we like to call them the show me's, the help me's, and the make me's. So as you can see, the majority of people fit in that help me bucket, and those are those folks that Cindy referred to that are looking up items when they don't know what to do with something, when they are ready to recycle or put something in the trash. For our smaller group of show me, they are just looking for some basic consistent education tools. So that's where those three rules come into play for that show me segment. Then for our help me segment, that's where we really want to, again, keep it simple and consistent, and we're focusing on barriers and benefits for them, as well as telling them the why, and telling them these materials need to get in the bin. Those contaminants such as the liquids and food, those are ruining other recyclables, so you don't want sort of all that good work to go to waste if you're ruining that whole load of recyclables. And then ask for a commitment at those community events that Cindy was mentioning. Ask for people to take a pledge and then remind them of that pledge along the way. And then for our last segment, this is the Make Me segment, and that is where you're using feedback levers to change behavior. So we'll get to that down the road a little bit here. So our goal was feedback at the cart, designing. So once we had Recycle Right up and running, we were looking to pilot addressing contamination. And our idea was to design cart tags that I'm sure many of you are familiar with using to emphasize recycling right at home and really targeting those recycling myths. also that when in doubt, more than, as Cindy mentioned, 24% of consumers are putting an item in the recycling bin anyway. And so we want to really decrease that and decrease contamination and then really maintain behavior. We want people to still recycle. That's really important to us, and that's really important for recycling as a brand. But we want to focus on those good behaviors and habits and reinforce those. So again, our desired behaviors were to focus back on these 3 steps, and we just really emphasized the recycling basics. And that those were our 3 steps in order to improve recycling rates and decrease contamination. So our pilot location, Waste Management identified a city that was about 35 miles outside of the city of Chicago. They were seeing high volumes of contamination, and a huge part of the success there was that the city had support from key stakeholders to support a pilot to target contamination. When we heard from Waste Management, we looked into just general census data and saw that almost 50% of the population was Hispanic, so that was important in terms of our messaging and materials. And then Waste Management worked to identify the routes to test the cart tagging. So our strategy that we had was to educate, tag, and then track to see how those were doing. We wanted to make sure that we were getting the education out in advance, letting people know of those 3 rules and educating that we were going to be coming through with the cart tags to let them know that was going to be happening. And then, of course, we wanted to see how we were doing. So for education, our first piece was to send out a mailer. This included our 3 steps on there, and also is really highlighting the tags to let people know that those are coming. We wanted to notify residents so that they knew what was happening there. Our next step was online education. We worked with the city to incorporate messaging on the city website. Again, as Cindy mentioned, people are looking on their city websites for that recycling information, so we wanted to make sure the messaging was consistent there. We also worked with Waste Management to create the Recycle Often, Recycle Right myths page, and that really has these interactive tiles where people can roll over the items that are on the page and kind of test their knowledge and see if something is recyclable or where the proper place where it should go. And then social media outreach was really important as well, and I think that it was really important to know that when people are sometimes putting something in and it is, they're not really sure if it's recyclable or not, but they don't really know what's happening at the MRF. And so it was really important to show videos on social media to show them like what the MRF looks like, what was happening there. And it also was really important that we use these Facebook ads with city zip codes in order to let folks know that what contamination was looking like in their region and kind of show them, the plastic bags and what was happening there. So the next process was to tag and track. So we created these positive and negative tags, and it was really important to reinforce good recycling habits. Again, back to those the census data, it was important that we trans-created tags with English and Spanish on the tags. And I want to stress, let me talk a little bit about transcreation. So transcreation is a process where we work with our multicultural team here at C+C in order to translate not only the words but the meaning. And that is in order to make sure that we are getting the message across to our audience, but also, the context. It's really important to make sure that that is happening and that we're not just having just a straight one-to-one translation. We want to make sure that the meaning around, the recycling education and what is being put out there is really important. So I want to just walk you through the this is where we sort of ended up with our tags, but that wasn't where we started. So I want to take you through the journey of the tags. So here's our evolution of the tags. For number one, we started off with a letter grade. And so this was A plus C minus to really stress that we wanted to reinforce those good recycling behaviors, and then also let people know that you're not doing so hot here. C minus is kind of your grade. And so something to take into account here was that when we talked to our multicultural experts, she said, letter grades don't really translate to other cultures, so let's try something else. So our second tag was that we tried recycle often, recycle right, all-star. And for the red tag, needs improvement. And again, our multicultural expert was saying, recycling all-star, not so culturally competent, so let's try something else. So we ended up here on option number 3 with recycling emojis. And so you have kind of the happy face and a little bit more surprised face. And overall, it was also really important that we had good behavior and bad behavior tags in order to make sure that we kind of wanted to create a social norming process that was happening, so that people could see the good tags and the bad tags in their community. So again, as we mentioned, we wanted to execute and track those tags. So we had drivers along the routes tagging the carts and using the green tags to indicate good habits. And then we were identifying repeat offenders for, again, that Make Me group of kind of, flagging that for them that they needed to do a better job. And then, again, the success to this is really maintaining that behavior change, so educating and continuing to communicate those 3 rules and the importance of them. And then really celebrate success. I think that was a huge part of this as well, celebrating not only with the drivers tagging the carts, but with also getting the city on board and really impressed and happy about reducing contamination. So the results of this campaign were that we were able to reduce contamination. We tagged more than 7,000 carts, and we reached about 15,000 households through our communication. So it was a huge success, and we really did see a decrease in contamination. So I don't want to take up too much more time here, but we have one more quick case study that I wanted to share with you. And this applies to waste management in terms of organics and composting. So this one was to focus on getting non-organic contamination like plastic out of the recycling. And we found that 60% of all yard waste sent to landfill is that food scraps and food soil paper that could have been composted, but contamination was affecting the loads of compost that were being delivered to people's houses. So one thing that we worked with Waste Management was on this campaign called Keep Compost Au Naturel, and it was this sort of bingo card that we created for people to take off stickers when they bring produce home, and customers were prompted to fill up their card with produce stickers and redeem it for a free bag of compost from Cedar Grove, is our local composting company out here in the Pacific Northwest. And this was a amazing campaign. People, like, the amount of work they had to do with this was a lot. They had to continually fill up a card and put stickers on it, and we had about 1,600 cards redeemed by the end of the year. And it was so successful that people were also continuing to print out their own bingo cards and continue to bring them in. As you can see in this picture, this woman has one full sheet there that she's holding, and then her kind of own DIY sheet that she has made in the other hand. So I just would want to stress that this was a great campaign. People loved participating. Our lesson learned was we were so impressed by the response rate that we would suggest kind of adding a while supplies last or kind of caveat on there in order to just kind of manage budgets and giveaways on that end, because we were really impressed with this response rate, and it was great to see everyone so enthused about addressing contamination in composting. So with that, we just wanted to say thank you and thanks for letting us share with you guys.
Thank you so much, Anna and Cindy. While I'm setting up the next presentation, I'm going to ask kind of a question that came up on our question field, see if you can help us with this. It said, we asked Cindy to repeat which part of the U.S. feels confident at recycling. I think the audio went out for a moment, so that was just a question. And the next one is, may we get the survey questions, responses, and reports from C+C? Sounds useful to inform my work.
Sure, we'd be happy to share the data, and Terry, I'll be happy to send it to you after the fact. You can share it with the group as you see appropriate. So in terms of regionality of importance of recycling, was that the question, the importance question? 70% in the, I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. It was 70% said very important in the Northeast, and 22% said somewhat important, so that gives you 92% in the Northeast.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was great. We're going to move on to the next presentation. Our next presenter is Tamara Staranchuk. She's a senior communications coordinator in the city of Toronto. She has a journalism degree from Ryerson University in Toronto and over 13 years of communications experience. She's been working for the city for the past 6 years, first in economic development and culture, and then with strategic communications, supporting parks, forestry, and recreation, and now solid waste management services. Prior to joining the Toronto Public Service, she held a number of diverse positions at organizations such as TV Guide Canada, a marketing publishing company, a nonprofit arts organization, and an RBC Royal Bank and HSBC Canada. And I really want to express my appreciation for her willingness to sort of step in at the last minute. You may have seen on the notice about the webinar a different name for this presentation, but we're really grateful to have Tamara join us this afternoon. And we particularly are interested in the city of Toronto because this may be a little known fact outside of Toronto, but there are something like over or close to 100 languages spoken in the city. So communication, particularly in a multicultural, multilingual setting, is particularly challenging in Toronto, and that's one of the things we hope to learn more about during the presentation this afternoon. So take it away. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much, Terry. I'm going to start today by just sort of setting the stage about the type of waste management services offered by City of Toronto. So we basically collect from 461,000 single-family residential units, 409,000 multi-residential units, 13,000 small commercial, and then various street litter, recycling bins, park bins, cleanup and diversion efforts for special events. And then we also, at our drop-off depots and landfills, do accept some waste from the commercial and institutional waste sector. As far as operating budget and capital go, it's about $389 million for operating and $89 million for capital. To give you a sense of the range of what we collect, it's garbage and blue bin recycling bi-weekly, green bin organics every week, leaf and yard waste bi-weekly from March through December. We pick up Christmas trees for 2 weeks in January. Oversized items like large appliances, furniture, and mattresses we collect on garbage collection days. Electronics are collected separately on garbage collection days as well, or through our depots and community environment days, which are essentially events held in all of the wards throughout the city where people can bring household hazardous waste, they can bring recycling, they can bring clothes for donation so that it is all properly disposed of. Household hazardous waste as well. We have a program called Toxic Taxi where you can arrange pickup of household hazardous waste. And again, that can go to our depots or be brought to community environment days as well. Just to give you a sense of the cross section, basically this is just residential, but the amount of tons that we pick up of each of the different waste streams. So you'll see that blue bin recycling is 112,000 tons. And the rest of sort of how the other pieces and diversion efforts factor in, but I know we're talking more specifically about recycling here, so I wanted to highlight that. Wanted to also show you our diversion rates. So essentially from a residential perspective, we have 53% diversion rate away from landfill. So that breaks down from single family to multi-residential very differently. So we have about 66% diversion for single family residential, and then about only 28% for multi-residential. So, I mean, I think it's half of our population actually lives in multi-residential housing. And we have a number of challenges then with that in terms of recycling, as far as even communicating directly to the residents. I mean, it's difficult for residents in multi-residential to sort of understand and see consequences to their behavior in the same way that single family can. I mean, you can put everything down a chute, you don't get a bill from us, sort of everything goes to a property manager or a superintendent. So we do have sort of many outreach efforts and solutions that we're working at to try and sort of move the gap between those diversion rates between single family and residential. And so, as mentioned, certainly it is a very diverse city. So we're at about a population of 2.8 million people, and almost half of those people were born outside of Canada. And Terry mentioned that it's about over 100 languages. It's really about 150 languages and different dialects are spoken here. So you'll see on this slide some of the breakdowns, basically just giving you a sense, but really the one to highlight again is that around 44% of Toronto residents have a mother tongue other than English or French. English or French are mentioned here because they're technically the two official languages in Canada. And so we have just over half of our population reporting English as the mother tongue. And then we have a certain percentage as well that speak English, but speak multiple languages as well. So we often look, in addition to languages, mother tongue, we look at languages spoken regularly at home. So about 26% of people in Toronto regularly spoke a language other than English or French at home, and just under 10% reported regularly speaking multiple languages at home. So our sort of top spoken languages at home in Toronto are, and this is in order, Mandarin, Cantonese, Tagalog, Tamil, and Spanish. So if you look, this is based on our 2016 census data, but this pretty much gives you a breakdown of both mother tongue and home languages spoken in Toronto. So I mean, other than English. So you'll see actually, even though French is an official language, on the mother tongue list, it's 11, and then on the home language list, it's 14. One thing to point out too is, as far Tagalog's number 3 on our mother tongue and home languages spoken, but this is actually, we don't often translate into Tagalog because our understanding is that most people read and consume in English as well, so much so that even the Tagalog newspaper that we advertise in requests them in either English or Tagalog. So as far as promotion and education tactics go, that sort of incorporate this multilingual approach for us. I mean, first and foremost, we try to make sure that our website is our primary communication tool so that any of the information that we're pushing out exists on the website and then is translatable through Google Translate. Also, through our 311 call center, we have translation services in a number of languages if requested by people. So we also have a customer service team within solid waste management services at the city, which does outreach, and certainly does outreach in the multi-residential sector, again, to try and work out different solutions based on case-by-case basis, because with such a diverse population and with such a large population, I mean, every building, every area of the city, it could be different in terms of their needs. So we have these customer service outreach teams to sort of help pinpoint what specific communication is needed, whether it be around languages or otherwise, or what challenges based on the different buildings. We also focus group some of the information that we put out and the terminology we use. And I think part of that lens as well is a multilingual lens. You know, does this information translate properly? Is it something that we're using that could use a conjunction that isn't easy if English isn't your first language? You know, in addition to terminology, sort of what things resonate from the perspective of what pictures, you know, is it what symbols? Is it an X? Is it a circle? What symbols help if language is a barrier in communicating these messages as well? We have something called a tenant engagement guide, which was created again for a multi-res superintendent or property manager that sort of helps them with avenues based on challenges to sort of get better engagement in the multi-res buildings. We also have a 3Rs ambassador volunteer program, which basically takes volunteers within these buildings who work as ambassadors for us within those buildings to help promote proper diversion and help really engage with residents. And this is really beneficial for us because I mean, they already have the context of the community, they're a member of that community, and so in some ways it's easier to get engagement through them, and they understand more the nuances of the demographics in their building, the nuances of the community, etc. So again, we use a number of multimedia tactics with print and ethnic papers, and basically, so we work sort of within that top 5 to top 10 languages, home languages spoken. And so you'll see here an example of our blue bin recycling guide. And we translate this and our green bin guide into over 10 languages because it is one of our primary sort of clear communication tools about what is accepted and what isn't. In addition, when we do advertising campaigns, we work to advertise in ethnic papers. So again, around the top 5 languages. And then what we've been really trying to do is get more into the digital ethnic space as well, so that we are sort of using multi-platforms from a multilingual perspective. We also put out a collection calendar each year to every resident in the city. And within that, we translate a summary of each page at the bottom to 5 different languages other than English. So we again use kind of the top 10. We also, for that, include French because there's sensitivity around it being an official language and just response and from the public. So around in general, public education to reduce contamination. Contamination is a large issue and a major challenge for Toronto right now. We're sitting at generally between 26 and 30% contamination. So, I mean, our focus is on promoting proper sorting, correct disposal behaviors, and this is ongoing education that's updated when new blue bin materials are added or to target specific unwanted items that contaminate the recycling stream. So just to give you a cross-section of some of the things we do, with such a large population and such disparity when you're talking about age, demographics, etc., we are trying to put out our messages on multiple platforms all of the time. So as mentioned, we have the collection calendars, numerous posters, brochures, stickers, letters. We have a tool called the Waste Wizard, which is an online tool where somebody can simply just type in the item they're wondering about, and then it will give them the correct disposal procedure and bin for that. So that includes information on about 2,000 items. We also have outreach through customer service and waste diversion teams, community environment days, which I mentioned, and the 3R ambassador program, which I mentioned. In addition, media relations. So media relations is really important to us as well, because any type of earned media really helps us get that message out and helps bring the conversation to the forefront. This year, we've been really fortunate to be part of the national conversation that's going on right now about recycling in terms of the challenges with markets due to the China restrictions. Right now in Ontario, there is legislation that could come into effect that would move us or shift us towards partial producer responsibility to extended full producer responsibility that would then standardize the list of blue box items and programs across the province. So that ties into the conversation right now, as well as, you know, there's a plastics conversation, single-use plastics conversation right now that's also at the forefront. So all of these things kind of coming together that are linked. When we do have the opportunity to be part of the conversation and speak about them, we can sort of help the public understand the interrelation between these things, the cost implications between these things. So much so that, well, from a communications perspective, we work really hard to make sure we don't throw in a word like contamination and we explain what that means. It is a word that is now becoming a little bit more mainstream. So another tactic that we use is a letter to residents. So this is something we did as far as contamination goes. And I'll show you on another slide sort of what that looked like. But it was basically a letter sent to all single family residents and multi-residential units in the city. In addition to that, we'll send letters to multi-residential property owners and superintendents to inform them first and foremost that their residents are going to be getting these letters, but also about resources available from the city to help them. So one of the things within the tactics that we always try and do, because we recognize that it can be confusing, and certainly with multi-layered packaging and more packaging coming onto the market, it becomes increasingly confusing. For us, one of the issues is too, jurisdictionally, there are different rules across the province, across the country. So certainly we try and always focus on providing them information about the tools like our Waste Wizard, our website, that they can use as well. We also work to leverage social media as a platform as well, and it's been really interesting to see the evolution of some of the engagement, where we try and just talk about some of the items that we can accept and we explain why. And it's so interesting, some of the conversations that have come out of that. For us, we did one on black plastic, that then a local kind of blog, online publication picked up the conversation, and then it sort of blew up on their social media, which then prompted the media interest in it. So again, you know, one tweet sort of started this broader conversation and allowed sort of that conversation to play out at a higher level, sort of within the media, with different vantage points than just the city's perspective where this conversation started. So here's an example of a Recycle Right campaign that we started last year. So the idea was that, you know, bad things happen when recycling and A, B, or C get together. So what we tried to do, and you'll see the lineup here in one of the digital ads, is really focus on sort of the top issues and the top contaminants. And so the videos are a little bit playful, and then they sort of lead to information that talks about, why these are an issue, whether it is, they cause sorting machines to be tangled at the recycling facility, or they increase our processing costs, or they could lead to workplace injuries at the facility. That the fact that it costs the city millions each year, that essentially, when garbage items are put in recycling, we're essentially paying to process them twice. So the campaign was definitely well received, and we continue to run it this year, but we're working on sort of refreshing it as well, and sort of taking the more direct approach versus the high level foundational stuff that was done to sort of set up the whole bad things message to begin with. So this next slide, this is the letter I was talking about that was sent. And basically, you'll see a direct mail piece right over here. Somebody obviously took a picture of it and put it on their fridge. But so the image on the left was the part of that you can't see, the front part. But again, sort of the top 5 culprits. Sort of a letter talking about contamination and the issues, providing tips on recycling right, providing the different avenues you can go to look up the information, etc. So this was really interesting. It prompted a significant amount of media, responses from residents, etc. And we did translate a summary of this letter into 4 different languages as well. And we didn't do French on this one, but it was made clear to us that certainly that is something that when we're translating other languages together, that as far as the community is concerned, that is something they would like to see moving forward, that French be included in the way that we include it in the calendar. So before I start talking about just a quick overview on our long-term waste management strategy, while we are, through our Recycle Right campaign, really focusing on 5 major contaminants, what we are also doing is, and you'll see in that previous slide too, that direct mail piece said is costing the city and could cost you. So really there, we went a little bit more direct than we would before, because we wanted to bring the cost message to the forefront, because certainly I think a lot of, our messaging around this that speaks to when you put these in, you can ruin paper and send it to landfill. You can ruin other perfectly good recyclables and send them to landfill by putting the wrong items in there. That's an environmental message we hoped would resonate, but we knew that a cost message would resonate as well. I mean, certainly anything that is a cost to the city, I mean, certainly this is a rate-paying service that's provided, so there is a link between that. In addition to that, another avenue that we do try and do is we try and focus on the idea that we also want to put out those messages reminding people about what you can recycle, reminding people about the things they already know that they can recycle. So despite the fact that it's confusing, we try to sort of integrate messages of, okay, these don't go in here, but all of these things also do, so that we try and sort of keep a balance between that, because we do understand, again, that it's confusing, and we understand that there's some fatigue out there. So we want to remind them that there is a large range that they can recycle, and that we do have tools to help them do so. So part of our long-term waste management strategy, which I'll get into in a second, included a recommendation for enhanced promotion and education. So essentially, the waste strategy is a council-approved strategy that is to guide decision-making and the way waste will be managed in the City of Toronto for over the next 30 to 50 years. A ton of different consultation and engagement was done in the development phase of the strategy. This just, I won't go through it all, but gives you sort of a cross-section of the breadth of what was done. And as mentioned, one of the things that came out of it was enhanced tools for public education. that was one of the 16 recommendations adopted. Basically, just a quick overview on the strategy. It has an aspirational zero waste goal and a shift towards a circular economy. But one of the main goals is 70% diversion from residential by 2026, and then 70% diversion of the waste collected from commercial customers as well. So, and that's from the commercial customers that we collect from. So basically, I mean, public education very much factors into helping us achieve those goals. Also, diversion is a main focus of the strategy, but also waste reduction. And as well, I mean, it even brings in, we're looking at testing mixed waste processing and with organics processing as part of the strategy as well. So that's all part of sort of the conversations that are happening right now around contamination, around diversion. So again, just another sort of quick snapshot to give you a look at the types of things or categories within the strategy. And then again, promotion and education tools. So these being used to sort of support and help implement the waste strategy and the goals. One thing we heard was we want it to be easy to digest, but we also want it in multiple formats. So online tools comes into that. So we're actually working on an app that should launch this summer, which incorporates our Waste Wizard sorting tool. Will give people access to their collection schedules about what to put out when, give them locations they can donate to, give them our drop-off depot locations as well, in a way to try and give them that information at their fingertips to help them sort properly. Other elements that tie into the public education would be supporting volunteers like our 3Rs ambassadors. So sort of what do they need to help be ambassadors and help engage residents and provide them with the sort of more specific tools that are needed. Again, targeted outreach conversations, advisory groups, leveraging social media again, targeted communications. So where we can target, I mean, we look at how and when we can do that. Certainly with the scale of a 2.8 million population and needing to get the information out to that many, it limits our ability to target, but we do still understand the value of it and do it where we can. And the other avenue is also creating community partnerships. So partnerships potentially with agencies within communities who can help get messages out, who really understand that community, who maybe are sometimes places where people come to access information about all types of things, where we could incorporate information for them about proper sorting and that type of thing. So looking at other partnerships, even from the reduce reuse perspective throughout the city and where we can implement programs like that. And so thank you. That is all from us.
Thank you, Tamara. That was great. Really appreciate your presentation. So that we have some time for all the questions that are coming in, I'm going to quickly switch presenters to Cheryl Baldwin, and I'm going to start to introduce her as Cheryl gets her slides going. Cheryl has worked in sustainable materials management for over 30 years. She works with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. She's been there since 2008, and she is the lead for the Recycle Connecticut Foundation, overseeing their grant-making programs and statewide recycling marketing campaign called What's In, What's Out. And she's facilitated the creation of a universal list in Connecticut for the campaign. She also coordinates the Connecticut WRAP initiative, provides outreach and professional development for municipal recycling coordinators and environmental educators, and helps develop and implement product stewardship programs. She received her MS in Resource Development from Michigan State University and a bachelor's degree in Solid Waste Management from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I wanted to just thank Cheryl for joining us today. And I want to just mention before I turn it over to her, that we will be, both NERC and NMOA will be posting the slides from today's presentations, and we'll be posting a recording of the presentations as well on our website. So if you want to get access to all of this great material, check our websites, and those should be up in the next few days. So Cheryl?
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me and letting me share what we're working on in Connecticut. So I know that time is of the essence, so hopefully I will move forward here. Oh, already having problems with my slides. Okay, so it's important for everybody to understand that in Connecticut, we have mandatory recycling. Mandated recyclables, legislation passed in 1989, coming into effect in 1991, which was most of this list. And then in 2012 and 2013, more materials were added, but the bulk of it was in 1989. We had a lot of education and promotion in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, and then have had no outreach and promotion since. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Recycle CT Foundation, the harmonization process, and the What's In, What's Out campaign. So the Recycle CT Foundation was created as a result of legislation back in 2014, basically to develop education and research activities to increase our recycling rate or our diversion rate. We have a goal of 60% diversion by the year 2024, and so the idea that the foundation would help with that. Part of the focus was also to distribute and administer grants to help achieve those goals. Part of the legislation required that it become a 501c3, and it started with an advisory council and then moved on to a board of directors. The chair is currently the commissioner of Connecticut DEEP, and then we also have facility operators, other folks in the industry, municipal recycling coordinators, et cetera. So it's an interesting group of folks that still help start the organization and oversee a lot of its programs. So the first funding program that it provided was actually a facilitator training program for folks that provide professional development to educators, as well as provide education through nature centers throughout Connecticut. The idea is originally folks wanted to create new curriculum for schools, and quickly that was squelched into let's really help folks that do the education and do the training, understand about Connecticut and how Connecticut manages its materials. A great indicator is if we know that you're talking about saving things from the landfill, then you don't know anything about Connecticut, because most of our materials, of course, go to a waste-to-energy facility if they're not covered through reduction, reuse, recycling, composting. School grant program has been run for the last 3 years. You know, it's a small grant program, but it actually is great. It's engaging schools to think about materials management in a different way. 2-year cycle for an innovation grant program to really try to push the nonprofit sector or the 501c3 sector, which is not that large, not very active in Connecticut, and so it's to try to encourage folks to get into this sector. And then now it's the What's In, What's Out campaign, where our first phase started at the end of 2016, and our second phase started just a couple of months ago. And the reason I'm sharing the amount is we don't have any money. And so it's letting you know what can we do, small state, small amount of money, but try to have an impact. So why now? Well, our 2015 solid waste characterization study shows that 14 to 19% of the materials coming into our residential facilities that process single stream is contamination. And a large part of that is actually bags of material. And what they found in terms of audits is that half of the materials that are bagged is recyclables and half of it is trash. And ultimately, the facilities don't have time to go through any of it, and it all gets tossed. We also have the same type of contamination that everybody else has. Plastic bags are a big issue, shredded paper, et cetera. We also have a lot of different rules, different guidelines, different lists, et cetera. Once dual stream started becoming sort of the background and everybody started moving towards a single stream collection system, we found that every town was coming up with their own rules. Even if they had a contract with the same facilities, they would have different guidelines in terms of no pizza boxes, only the top of the pizza box, only if the pizza box was not greasy, et cetera, et cetera. And so we realized that if we wanted to do some type of a statewide campaign, that we were going to have to figure out how to harmonize the list. So the ultimate goal is to increase participation and decrease contamination for this campaign, and make it easier for residents to really understand what goes in the bin. Just for you to be aware, we have 169 towns in Connecticut, 3.5 million people, and we have a combination of municipal curbside pickup, whether it be a private hauler or a municipal hauler. We also have a lot of private subscription towns, and then we also have a lot of rural towns that have transfer stations. And in some cases, you have small communities sharing transfer stations. So the harmonization process was great, actually. I think it was probably part of the great success of this program, because we partnered with all the facility operators. We have 5 companies that run residential single stream processing facilities. And we started by using a survey that the Recycling Partnership created for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And we sent that to our facilities with a couple of tweaks, because we have mandated materials, and so we needed to have an understanding of how they felt about some of the mandated materials as well. And then we followed up with a series of in-person meetings where we literally went through every single product category and tried to find out whether or not it should be on the list. We followed up with phone calls, updates, and recently had another check-in to see where people were at. So what were we asking? We were asking, is the item or material detrimental to your system? Meaning, is it harmful to your employees, or are there safety concerns in terms of your staff? As the materials come in, could it shut down or harm your equipment? And as the materials come in, does it reduce the value of the commodities? And for us, it was also, or is it reducing the value of the mandated materials? We did have to put glass in the parking lot. We know that glass is a huge issue for everybody, but it is a mandated material, and without legislation, we just felt it was just too cumbersome to deal with. So we decided to just put it aside and really focus on everything else. During the process, we identified that clearly there are materials that our facility operators want, but they don't want it in the curbside containers. They don't want it in the mixed recycling stream. They want it source separated. And that led us to identify a number of things that were out. Plastic film is a great example. Textiles is another. We also discovered that sometimes municipalities, through their contract with the facilities, were requiring them to take what we started recognizing as detrimental. Polystyrene and styrofoam and shredded paper, plastic bags were all part of these categories where municipalities requested and required, and yet ultimately it was detrimental to the system. So this has been very helpful for us to understand that our facility operators are really, they want to serve their customers, and they're put in a tight bind. So it was great that as part of the partnership, we could step forward and say, stop putting that material in your bin, even if it's on your contract. As part of our general education for municipal recycling coordinators, and in some cases residents or residential groups or different groups that I speak with, we definitely bring back the issue of quality, and as well as the understanding of how collection is only one part of the cycle. Those of us that have been in the biz for a long time, we talk about it all the time, but it's important for folks that are new to the industry and perhaps even new to their position as recycling coordinator that we need people to understand that it's not just the collection. That in terms of the Connecticut industry, we have facilities that have to sort and process, bale to specification, and then sell it. And then ultimately, as we as consumers should be looking at trying to purchase it again. To try to also emphasize the point of the market issue in terms of that, we get a lot of pushback about plastic bags, shredded paper, and I try to share that it's not that you can't recycle it, it's not that it doesn't have value, but it doesn't have value in the current system and that we need to change it. So just a great emphasis. sadly, about plastic bags and how other tangles get into our system, and how this is really a staff issue as well, because here we have folks that have to jump into the machines and manually cut it. And that's all the material from, I think it was a 15-minute break. This has a great impact on both our municipal recycling coordinators to understand why we need a universal list, as well as residents to try to take plastic bags out. I think Terry mentioned that I also coordinate the Connecticut WRAP program. We started the Connecticut WRAP program before this campaign to try to prepare people because we knew bags were going to be such a personal issue that people were going to be upset about. So we wanted to give them an alternative and make sure that they knew they could bring them back to grocery stores before we just said out. Glass is another great example to show this is what MRF glass looks like and all the different things that come through, which we often refer to as the wish cycling. It's plastic, it has a number, it must be acceptable, etc. Before we created our universal list, we also tried to standardize our language for the campaign. With the Recycling Partnership, of course, we used their survey to try to understand how they were using language. We looked at Vermont and Massachusetts as a region. And then we also worked with the More Recycling and the American Chemistry Council that has standard language for plastic containers. We decided to stop using the term single stream. We're in the process of, and I say process because not everybody is doing it. It's really hard to change our language, but we're now talking about mixed recycling and mixed recyclables. We're trying to talk about plastic containers with less reliance on numbers because that confuses residents. If there's a number and an arrow, they're going to throw it in the bin. So we're trying to educate them that it's about tubs, food storage containers, cups, etc. While bulky rigid plastics are pretty much all on the out in terms of the mixed recycling stream, we are trying to educate people about the terminology and, again, not the numbering. Ultimately, the campaign is about clean, no food. And just so you're aware, when we went through the whole list of materials with all the facility operators, the marketing team was actually present as well. And I think that was really helpful. Some big changes, everybody agreed to pizza boxes. And you got to remember, our universal list was created before the sword, even before the fence. And would we do things differently? Perhaps, but this is the list we have at the time. So pizza boxes, all in. Black plastic, all in. And then out is loose bottle caps, shredded paper, etc. This is a slide I share with municipal recycling coordinators to say that this is really about a residential program. It's about mixed recycling. However, if they have businesses that they feel that their waste stream and their recycling stream fits, they're more than welcome to use this material. We just don't want to confuse people by assuming that their stream is similar to residents. So this is the list. This is the big infamous list. What's in for paper? It's pretty standard, newsprint, magazines, boxboard, office paper. Those top four are all part of the mandated materials. And then we move on to bags and cartons and phone books, pizza boxes, etc. What's out? Shredded paper. This had a lot of outcry about shredded paper, and we now have a lot of municipalities that are developing full-fledged programs or pilot projects to collect shredded paper separately. Most of these programs tend to be at transfer stations, but they are still trying to collect the paper, but source separated. Gift wrapping was another issue. Folks really felt that it was too complicated for people to understand when there was foil or actually when it was plastic or when it was paper. And we do have one community that actually collects this separately. And then the other materials are all out: ice cream, paper cups, takeout containers. Glass is pretty standard. In is bottles and jars, out windshields, ceramics, drinking glasses, etc. Aluminum and steel, cans and bottles, foil, metal lids from cans, metal lids from glass jars. It's basically the traditional list. We're going back to the basics in a way. Food-grade aerosol cans were okay. There were some companies that would be open to any aerosol and some companies that weren't open to any. And so we landed on food aerosol cans only. The top foil lid peeled off yogurt container is for the Uber recyclers. It was sort of a joke by our facility operators because they knew that everybody in the room probably put our little foil lid from yogurt containers in our bin, and they asked us to stop. Of course, propane tanks are a big problem. Spiral wound containers are not in, and they do want scrap metal, but they don't want it in the mixed recycling bin. Pots and pans are the same. For plastic bottles and jugs are in. Non-bottle containers, if they're clean, yogurt cups, etc. Plastic disposable one-use cups in. It's basically what you might refer to as the red cups, or sometimes those clear cups. Those are pretty much it. Black plastic containers are in, flower pots, etc. What's out? Loose bottle caps. This was also a huge discussion for our group. Everybody pretty much didn't want any bottle caps, and then we landed on bottle caps on bottles because of the national campaign. All bulky ridges should be collected separately. No styrofoam or polystyrene at all. No plastic bags, films, tarps, etc. No prescription pill bottles, mostly due to the size. And of course, no hazardous materials and no single-use plastic utensils. And then generally, what I think everybody usually has that should be somewhere else. Small things that continue to be an issue are pens, pencils, hangers. Believe it or not, car parts are a big thing that end up in our facilities. And of course, no single-use coffee cups, toothbrushes, razors, etc. So this is our web page. I think I have 5 minutes. I want to show you my web page. If I can get on it, maybe I can't. But we also use the Recycle Wizard, which Tamara said was the Waste Wizard. Ours is all about recycling. We also have social media graphics and images. We have videos, and we have templates for collateral material, which includes brochures, tags, bill inserts, etc. And the way that we design these materials is that it's not just for municipalities that need to do education, but it's also for haulers, and it's for facility operators that need to try to educate people as well, because when you have a subscription hauler, you have the haulers that are providing the education. And we needed to have a range of materials that could be used. Our campaign does rely on a lot of paid media using Pandora, Facebook, and Dynamic. Oh. Let me see if I can get this up. I'm sorry that it's running slow here. Maybe it's not going to work. In terms of the effectiveness, we're finding that Pandora is a great media outcome for us, and that followed by Dynamic digital video, which is the video that comes up when you're on YouTube and you really want to watch that video, and it makes you watch that advertisement first. And that has been very effective for us too in terms of bringing us to our web page. We also have direct contact as well as a lot of referrals and Facebook and Instagram. What I wanted to mention in terms of the widget, and I apologize that my slideshow is, I can't seem to find this from here. In terms of our Waste Wizard, one of the things that we have is we have a contract with Recollect so that the Waste Wizard is available to any of our partners. So what it means is that USA Hauling, who is a partner with us because they're a facility operator, they actually put the widget on their website. The town of Middletown puts it on their website. Rural communities and the Housatonic Resources Recovery Authority put it on their website. And so because of that, that also drives it, and we're all using the widget that has the same list. And that has been proven very successful. The wizard has been really great. It shows you the top popular materials that people are searching. So these are the top materials as of May 23rd. And as you can see, all the materials, the top 3 are things that we don't want. People are still wondering, they're not sure. We also, it provides suggested materials. So these are different than what they were perhaps last month or even 3 months ago, because when I get about 6 or 8 searches, I can add it to the wizard. Because now I know that it's not just a random one-time search, but there are a lot of people that are concerned about or curious about that material. So I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to show you the page. I know we only have 7 minutes left, but I encourage you to go on our website and watch our videos, especially the opera, which has received some advertising awards for our creative partners. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was great. So with the few minutes that we have left, I'm going to try to get to some of the questions that people focused on. I don't know, Cheryl, while I'm doing that, if you want to try to pull up that webpage that you wanted to show people, and then you can display it. Way back at the beginning of the webinar, we had a question that I think maybe any of the presenters could comment on. How to get people beyond their own apathy, indifference, and laziness to get the public to realize recycling is in their best interests. Anyone want to tackle that one? Tamara, I think you need to unmute yourself. You're muted. Cindy, Anna, Cheryl, you want to take on this kind of fundamental question about getting people to be less apathetic?
This is Cheryl from Connecticut. I don't know about apathy, but because our campaign was really like, hey, something's different, something's new, we have this new list, we've been getting a lot of responses because people are like, what? What are you talking about? Sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're excited to get the answer. I actually respond individually to every single email request and Facebook comment because I find that that helps engage, and the more that I respond directly, the more that people know that somebody does care on the other end about what they're doing. I don't know if that helps with apathy, and maybe if the first speaker, Cindy and Anna, will say that people I'm reaching are the folks, of course, that have the questions. But
no, this is Anna. I agree with what what Cheryl is saying. I think one of the things that we have found is that, and especially with that data that Cindy showed, is that the majority of people do really want to recycle. It's kind of just getting them to get the right material in the right bin. And I do agree with what Cheryl's saying in terms of it's having those conversations with people, having the conversations with the doubters or kind of the more lazy recyclers to even the more active recyclers who have the questions. I think we have seen a lot of value in that one-to-one outreach and having those conversations.
Yeah, and I think like Cheryl made some good points about talking about what's new, what's different, because that is something that can pique your consumer's interest. And I think just like any good marketing message, what's key is making your message relevant to the consumer. So that's a great way to do it.
I think in Toronto for us as well, sort of bringing cost message home, I think did resonate with some people who maybe didn't, like I said, care about the environmental message. At the same time that direct mail piece and that letter went out, the city was also piloting bin inspections. So similar to what Anna was talking about in that one case study, but essentially doing bin inspections at the curb, tagging those bins with issues, giving people education materials and asking them to sort of clean that material up. I mean, I think that is sort of a combination of where sort of communications and then the operational side kind of work together, because then that person, I mean, who maybe was a little bit more apathetic, I mean, there's sort of the direct contact with them versus the sort of more global message that is easier to ignore, I think. And, your bin being stickered, similar to the way they were tagged too. I mean, some people, I think, don't like the optics of that either as well.
So Cheryl, for some reason, I can see the GoToWebinar box blocking the view of your, okay, there you go. Thank you. Okay. So another question in the last few minutes that we have, one person asked, why is shredded paper a problem? I don't know, Cheryl, you can answer that quickly.
Yeah, so we visited all the facilities as we were creating the list and having conversations about how facilities would think about harmonizing. And the one thing I know is the air quality was atrocious, and it was really from the paper. So if you start from that detrimental list of the value of our staff and the safe environment for them, the paper was, it was just all in the air. It was awful. And that's because it just keeps getting drummed up and drummed up. Whether people put it in bags or not, it doesn't matter, because then, of course, the bags pop, and then the bags and the shredded paper are a problem. You'll find that if the shredded paper makes it through the whole system in a bag, they might be able to find some value, but then you have to have the staff open it up. Of course, we also know that shredded paper is less valuable than non-shredded paper because it reduces the length of the fiber. And so there's different levels of what we might tell consumers based on their concerns. But ultimately, if we collect shredded paper, we want it source separated.
So this is a question for C+C. Would the waste management 123 images be available for use, or are they proprietary? Cindy or Anna?
This is Anna. Yeah, so you can go to recycleoftenrecycleright.com, and Waste Management has a bunch of resources available there for residents, businesses, schools, multifamily, a bunch of different materials to download on those resources pages. They don't necessarily talk about, say, the 3 rules, but they are all kind of in the Recycle Often, Recycle Right family, and that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, there is somebody who said they want that information for other communities. They want to use, material that's already been prepared.
Yep.
So,
all up there
okay.
on that the landing page, yeah.
Okay, and how does a city deal with contamination in downtowns and parks? I don't know, Tamara, if you want to take on that one?
Yeah, so we're actually just working on a campaign right now that sort of speaks to proper sorting in public spaces, because we do have sort of more unique contaminants in those spaces, more on-the-go items and that type of thing as well. So that's something that we're working to do in collaboration to complement sort of our overall campaigns and overall contamination messaging. I mean, one thing that we're starting right now, we get a lot of disposable coffee cups, obviously, in the wrong bins in both our parks and our street litter bins. So one thing that we're testing in those areas is no coffee cups stickers on the actual blue bins or the recycling part of the street litter bin. In addition to that, another thing that the City of Toronto is piloting right now is actual green bins in sort of 20 parks where we have dog off-leash areas, because a major contaminant in our blue bin on street and park bins is dog poop or sort of organic waste like fruit peels or that type of thing, and napkins.
Thank you. I think we are just about out of time, and we do have a lot of questions here. So I might try to share these questions with the presenters and seeing if we can put something together, some written answers to these really good questions that folks have been raising, particularly some of these at the very end. And then we can see if we can, post on with the slides and the video of this webinar, the answers to some of these questions. But I just want to let folks know that the NMOA and NERC will be posting the presentations, the PowerPoint presentations, as well as a video of this webinar on our websites. That's www.nerc.org or www.newmoa.org. And but give us a day or two, a couple of days to make this material available, and then you can check out our websites and find the slides and the video on our website. So again, I want to thank our presenters. These were great presentations, a lot of information, and we really appreciate their willingness to share all of this with us today. And I want to thank all of you who joined us, and Marion Romolador, my colleague at NERC, who helped organize this webinar today. It's been a great collaboration, and it's been a pleasure working together on this. So thanks, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.